Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Many of you have written to me that you've overdosed on national politics, and I agree with you. Even I have, with the reshuffle and everything that's gone on. But you know what? Politics is our life, and there is politics and politics and politics. So we will talk about politics again today, but a different kind of politics. One manifestation of politics, which is dynasty politics. Once again, you will say, you're telling us about the Gandhi Nehrus again. No, I will talk about dynasties elsewhere in the region, and this unique culture of dynastic succession in our neighborhood in the subcontinent. But before I go there, I will remind you that from today we've started our YouTube membership program. Please join in. All the benefits are listed. You join in by clicking on the button below. Go there. It is just 159 rupees per month, and you get oodles of benefits to which we will keep on adding. Anyway, so dynasties, what makes us think of dynasties just now? We can talk about dynasties in the subcontinent at any time. In fact, even if you remember that Aisi Taisi Democracy song, that also says wahan Bhutto hai, yahan Gandhi hai, basically saying that our countries in so many ways are like each other. But it isn't just that. Today there is a news peg, and the news peg is that Sri Lanka, tiny Sri Lanka in our neighborhood. So it's a small country, particularly by the subcontinent standards, just over 2 crore people, 2.2 crore, 2.25 crore people. But remember, it has social indicators that are marginally better than even Kerala's in India. Kerala is the state with the best social indicators in India. It's even better than that. So top class social indicators, and per capita income, which is today almost twice as much as India's, also has much less inequality than India, also is one of the democracies in the region. No democracy is perfect, and if you look at our region, the subcontinent, there is democracy of various kinds and various degrees and different varying quality in the various countries of the subcontinent. So barring, say, Bhutan, which is a monarchy and has been so stable monarchy, all the others today are democracies. Now, in Sri Lankan democracy, something interesting happened yesterday, and that is the reason we are visiting the dynastic question. That is, the fourth brother of the Rajapakshes got sworn in to the cabinet in the country. So that is number 4. That means one brother is the president, that is Gotabaya. Second brother, former president, is the prime minister, that is Mahinda. Mahinda is actually older than Gotabaya. Then there is Chamal Rajapakshe, who is a minister, and now Basil Rajapaksha, who is the fourth brother. He's just about 70 years old now. He's also become a minister now, and he's become minister for finance, key position. And you know what? To get him into the ministry, they've amended their constitution, because Basil has dual citizenship. Sri Lanka allows dual citizenship. So he has an American passport and a Sri Lankan passport. So while dual citizenship lets you do a lot of stuff as a citizen of Sri Lanka, it bars you from holding public office or contesting elections. But in his case, they amended the constitution. भाई के लिए कुछ भी करेगा, because why? मेरा एक भाई president, एक भाई prime minister, तीसरा भाई भी cabinet minister. So I will have all my problems sorted out. So Basil is got there. In addition, there is Namal Rajapaksha, who is 35. He is a son of Mahinda. He is also a cabinet minister, minister for sports. He's been a sportsman himself, and his commitment to sport shows, because he led the Sri Lankan bid to get the 2018 Commonwealth Games into Hambantota. That is the constituency he represents in National Parliament in Sri Lanka. But obviously this was not a successful bid for Hambantota. Although seeing Hambantota, I don't see how it can accommodate something the size of Commonwealth Games, but that apart. So now there are 5 members of the Rajapaksha family or dynasty directly running Sri Lanka, and I will give you some tidbits in it. So who does Basil Rajapaksha get the finance ministry from? It was with Mahinda Rajapaksha. So even then it was not shared with anybody. So once again, Gotabaya president, Mahinda prime minister, Basil finance minister taking over from Mahinda, Chamal irrigation minister and also junior defense minister. Then you have other Rajapakshas. For example, Mahinda's son Yoshitha, he is chief of staff to prime minister, that is his daddy. So chief of staff to Mahinda Rajapaksha. There is Chandra Tudor, who is also his son, who is also working closely in the government. Then Chamal's son Shishendra, Chamal is the oldest of the brothers, who is irrigation minister. Chamal's son Shishendra is a non-cabinet minister, like a minister of state. So really one family has carved up everything within itself. Now this is a lot or a bit much even by the subcontinent's standards, and frankly maybe I have not been able to research deep enough, because if I research maybe deeper I will find more kinsmen and women in other key positions in the Sri Lankan government. So Sri Lankan government now, it's not just a case of dynastic rule by way of an elected dynasty. These are all elected, but it is now the entire government controlled by one family, where everyone else is secondary, to the extent that to accommodate one of them in the cabinet, you've even amended the constitution. In fact, the last time Mahinda Rajapaksha was in power, he was not able to get Basil into his government, so he had him as senior advisor because he had not been able to amend the constitution then, but he's done so. So if you see this, it makes you think about this unique culture that the subcontinent has of being ruled by dynasties, the competing dynasties, and usually this competition is quite bitter and vicious, almost feudal styles, because feudals also, their love and affection and hatred and revenge all goes family to family, generation to generation. In fact, I remember vividly a line that Benazir Bhutto spoke when Rajiv Gandhi went to Pakistan in December 1988 for the SAARC summit, and they had many bilateral meetings and people thought things were really going to improve between India and Pakistan then. So Rajiv Gandhi and Benazir together were addressing the big congregation there of leaders of South Asia and the world media. I was there also in Islamabad, and Benazir Bhutto said, Mr. Prime Minister, your mother and my father, your family and my family, from generation to generation. I am emphasizing that double N deliberately. In fact, if I had written it, I would have used a double N, because that's how she spoke, generation to generation. And I said immediately, oh, so this is something that is so widely accepted now that this is seen as an inevitability, and the absence of dynastic rule is seen as something unusual. And this happened later also, this came out later also when Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister. At one point, Benazir Bhutto said she never served a full spell as Prime Minister because the army and Ghulam Ishaq Khan, then President, would keep firing her. But this was one of the spells when she was Prime Minister, and she said, you know, all kinds of people have come to power in India. How do you relate to them? When the Gandhis were there, at least you could relate to them, you could talk to them. And Narasimha Rao was furious and decided to make a horrible example of her, which he did. But this was the presumption that this is an entitlement of dynasties. So Indian dynasties you know about, and we keep talking about them all the time. You know the Gandhis, and then you see many dynasties that have come up. Even the BJP's latest cabinet has many dynasts who've been sworn in or who've been elevated. So political dynasties are a part of democratic life. Some of those you see in America as well, for example. But if you leave that aside, leave India aside, look at our neighborhood and look at some more. Pakistan. So Pakistan, a research showed, and I will be sharing an article with you from Herald magazine of Pakistan, that shows that 44% of all of Pakistan's legislators, that is members of National Assembly and provincial assemblies, are dynasts, are from political families. 44%. And you know, since this research, I am sure the number has only gone up, it hasn't gone down. But the most important dynasty of Pakistan, the Bhutto dynasty. So you know, Sir Shah Nawaz Bhutto, who was aristocrat in India, in Bombay, he was very close to the British. He was also advising the Nawab of Junagadh when it came to choosing between accession to India or Pakistan, and that drama we've spoken about earlier in ACTC, so I will not go into it. But his son Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he was a very promising fellow. In fact, there is some rumor that when he lived in Bombay early on as a young man, he was besotted with film star Nargis at that point. But who knows at this point, at that point in time, which young Indian wasn't. But I read that about him. I also read a lot about the Bhutto family in a book that I'll refer to. This is a book by international journalist Owen Bennett Jones called The Bhutto Dynasty, Struggle for Power in Pakistan. And this has the finest detail on that dynasty. So Bhutto came to Pakistan. He was an admirer of Nehru's. He was in awe of Nehru's, and that's been recorded in many places. But remember, he did many things much younger than any of the Gandhis before he was a dynast. He was a minister in Field Marshal Ayub's government. It was a martial law government at the age of 31. At the age of 35, he was foreign minister and he was screaming abuses at India and also impressing the whole world with his oratory at the UN and elsewhere at just 35. And he was president of Pakistan at 43. In this case, an elected president. Meanwhile, he had also contributed greatly to the division of Pakistan, because but for him, maybe Yahya Khan and the Pakistani army and the Pakistani government in 1971 would not have taken the path they took in East Pakistan of what was to become Bangladesh subsequently. He was hanged by Zia, as we know. Zia, who he appointed as army chief, but that works in Pakistan. You appoint somebody an army chief and one day he fires you, exiles you, kills you, whatever. It happened to Nawaz Sharif with Musharraf as well later. But he was assassinated, judicially assassinated by Zia. His daughter Benazir was sent to jail. She was also kept in very tough solitary confinement for 10 long months. But she came back again to hold power in the country more than once. And once she was assassinated, because Pakistan has had this record of serial assassinations in particularly one dynasty, the Bhutto dynasty. Once she was assassinated, it was her husband, Asif Ali Zardari, who took over, and now her son, that is Bilawal Bhutto, is the one that's running the party with the father as a kind of patron-in-chief of the party. So that dynasty is intact, although out of power, and to some extent remains one of the challengers for power in Pakistan, although not as important as they used to be. But what has come in their place as the other political force is also a dynasty, and that's a new dynasty. That's a dynasty founded by Mian Nawaz Sharif. Now, Mian Nawaz Sharif's father was a contractor, Muhammad Sharif. He is a contractor, and I don't know how authentic this story is, but stories you hear is that he built a big house for a general, and general was happy with the work he did, and his sons used to work on the project, and the generals then identified Nawaz Sharif as a talented young man. This was Zia's time, when Zia was trying to build a partyless democracy, or a democracy around a king's party, around his own party, and that's how Nawaz Sharif was handpicked by the military establishment. That he was handpicked by the military establishment and the military right combination, that is true. He later evolved in politics in a marvelous way, but that's a different story. So he joined politics and he founded the new dynasty. So this is among the newest dynasties formed in the subcontinent. Obviously, Rajapakshas came after that. So today, if you see the Sharif dynasty, there is Mian Nawaz Sharif, who is in exile, but the preeminent leader of opposition in Pakistan. Frankly, if he came back and there was a fair election, he will win that election. I have very little doubt about that. If the army and the third empire, as they say, stayed out of all this, and if it was an election, not a selection, chances are that he will win. Now, his brother, Shehbaz Sharif, he is a former chief minister of Punjab, which is the largest province in Pakistan by far. In terms of its weight in Pakistan's politics, it is more than UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh put together, because it's 60% almost of Pakistan's population. So he was the chief minister of Pakistan's most important state. Today he is leader of opposition in the National Assembly. The Sharifs had a third brother also, Abbas Sharif, by the way, who unfortunately died of electrocution in 2013. Then the children, so Hassan Nawaz Sharif, that is the son, Hussain Nawaz Sharif, the other son, they both participated in politics and public life. Maryam Nawaz Sharif, though, is the heir apparent because she's now running the campaign and controlling the party in Nawaz Sharif's absence, and she's the most visible face and quite a fiery orator and very courageous woman. You know, she's been put under all kinds of pressure, but she has shown no sign of flinching. So quite a formidable politician. And then Hamza, Shahbaz's son, that is Nawaz Sharif's nephew, who's leader of opposition now in the Punjab Provincial Assembly. And I just told you the importance of Punjab in Pakistan. Then Safdar Awan, the son-in-law, who's also been targeted by the establishment because he's part of the ruling dynasty. So that is Pakistan. And if I start counting the other dynasties in Pakistan, that will take another hour. So that we will leave for some other time. And finally, Bangladesh. We talked about Bangladesh's politics a little bit when H.M. Murshad, the former dictator and president, passed away just last year at some point. But Bangladesh itself, again, it's a subcontinental phenomenon. Bangladesh formed its own dynasty. So Mujibur Rahman, the Bangabandhu, the founder of Bangladesh, the man who led the freedom movement for East Pakistan to become Bangladesh, his family was wiped out by the coup leaders who took over power from him, and they wanted to make sure that nobody from his family will survive. So even his little son was assassinated in the toilet. He was hunted down in the toilet and assassinated. But you know what? Sheikh Hasina survived, the daughter. She survived. That's a dramatic story how she survived for some other day. But she then took that dynasty forward. She's now been ruling Bangladesh for more than 10 years. She's a friend of India. In fact, I have to also thank her and the Bangladesh High Commissioner because I just got, she sent a lot of these wonderful Haribhanga mangoes from Rangpur district in Bangladesh to a lot of people in India. I was one of the recipients and these are wonderful mangoes. So she now rules Bangladesh. But what is the opposition? That's Khalida Zia. Khalida Zia's husband also, that is Ziaur Rahman. He was a dictator in Bangladesh. He came to power after destroying Mujibur Rahman's democracy. So there was a time when both sides of India, they were dictators called Ziaul Haq and Ziaur Rahman. So after Ziaur Rahman's death, Khalida Zia took over the mantle. She became the Prime Minister of Bangladesh also after that. Right now, she is in opposition and she's facing a lot of legal pressure and harassment and corruption cases. Even after Arshad, his wife, Roshan Arshad, tried to run his party, build his party, Jatiya Party, but that didn't go so far. And now Khalida Zia's son, Tariq Rahman, is seen as the heir apparent to her. So once again, Bangladesh politics is a story of 2.5 dynasties. I'm calling Arshad's a half dynasty. The other two are full dynasties. So why does the subcontinent have this phenomenon? That I leave to you. You figure out. If you figure out, you write to me. And remember now, if you've taken our YouTube membership, if you are a member, then I will personally, and I promise you, personally respond to whatever you write to us in response. So if you can resolve this riddle on why the subcontinent has such a fascination with dynasties in its politics, please write to us and I will respond to you. Once again, this is not to say that this only happens in the subcontinent, but it happens much more in the subcontinent. We know that 2 Bushes became presidents in America in quick succession, but that is not the point. The point is that in this subcontinent, this is the most accepted phenomenon. And why is it so?